All right, church. Have you ever found yourself in a battle? And when the battle lines are drawn and the energy of it starts increasing, you wonder to yourself, what am I doing here? Well, why am I in this battle? How did I get here? And how do I get out of this? I'm just going to be honest with you. Most of the time, it's when I criticize something that my wife has done, said, or seems to be thinking. and hope it'll be feisty, y'all. And the moment I realize that I have poked the bear, I wish I could rewind time and wish that I could have not said what I just said or looked the way that I looked or did what I did. But it's too late because I'm in the battle. And the thing that I'm discovering is that there are good battles to be a part of, and there are bad battles to be a part of. And one of the easiest ways to figure out whether or not I should even be in this battle is this question right here. Whose battle is it? Whose battle is it? You see, today we look at a very famous passage, 1 Samuel 17, where David finds himself in a battle. There's a few things that I want to point out to you, and so let's look at the backdrop. So start at verse 4 of chapter 17. It says this: and there came out from the camp of the Philistines, it's like in this corner, a champion named Goliath of Gath, whose weight was 6 cubits and a span. Y'all know how big that is, right? He had a helmet of bronze on his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail, and the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of bronze. Pay attention to how many times the word bronze is said. And he had bronze armor on his legs, and a javelin of bronze slung between his shoulders. The shaft of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his spearhead weighed 600 shekels of iron. Notice iron. And his shield bearer went before him. Now, here's why this is so important. Because even in the midst of a historical narrative that we find in 1 Samuel, you've got to understand that biblical authors often give details that are more poetic and metaphoric than not factual or historical, rather than details of what it was. So what I'm telling you is that when we read about bronze over and over and over again, the point that the author is trying to make here is not metallurgical, but theological. And here's why. Because when you in Hebrew look at the word bronze, you remember you read backwards in Hebrew, what you see are the exact same 3 letters in the exact same order as you would for the word serpent. So what this author is doing by saying bronze and bronze and bronze is not helping you paint a visual picture of the battle. He is trying to tell you, this is the serpent, this is the serpent, this is the serpent. Right? What he wants you to see from the outset, from the beginning of this battle, is that David is not fighting a 9-foot tall giant, although he is. He is fighting the enemy of humanity. You just have to see that from the very beginning, because bronze will come up again in a second. So fast forward down to verse 21 and we read this. It says, and Israel and the Philistines drew up for battle, army against army. And David left the things in charge of the keeper of the baggage, and he ran to the ranks and went and greeted his brothers. And as he talked with them, behold, the champion, the Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, remember, in this corner, and came out of the ranks of the Philistines and spoke the same words as before. And David heard him. And what were those words? Hey, I'm the champion of the Philistines. Where's Israel's champions? We'll fight. We'll settle this like men. And so David hears some whispers amongst the soldiers of what Saul has promised for the person that will step up and be the champion. And in verse 26, we read this, and David said to the men who stood by him, what shall be done for the man who kills this Philistine and takes away the reproach from Israel? Why? Because David was after some sort of gain? No, not at all. Listen to what he says. he says this, "For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?" You see, David is asking not because he wants the reward. He is asking because he is offended by what this enemy of God and God's people is saying. And he wants to do something about it. So Saul brings him into his tent and they have this powwow, this meeting before David goes and fights him. And he's like, "Are you sure?" Like Saul's like, "Are you sure?" But in verse 34, we read David's response. "Your servant used to keep sheep for his father. And when there came a lion or a bear and took a lamb from the flock, I went after him. And I struck him and delivered it out of his mouth." I went and yanked the lamb out of his mouth. "And if that bear or that lion arose against me, I caught him by his beard, I struck him and I killed him. Your servant has struck down both lions and bears, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be like one of them, for he," here it is again, "for he has defied the armies of the living God." And David said in verse 37, "The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine." If God can do it with these animals, he can do it with this 9-foot serpent king giant. And so Saul had an idea. Listen to this, pay attention. "Then Saul clothed David with his armor." Listen to the description. "He put a helmet of bronze on his head and clothed him with a coat of bronze mail." And so all of a sudden, Saul, again, you've got like these details. When bronze shows up, you got to pay attention. It always has a smack of the enemy. And so Saul is now inviting David to fight in the same way as the Philistine. But David is going to have none of it. He says, "I didn't need this when I went against the lion and the bear. I don't need this when I go against the Philistine, as long as the Lord is with me." So last video, you found out about my love of sarcasm. I also have an immense love of smack talk, right? Like, listen, let's be very clear. The way that Pastor Rick and I have bonded over the years is he can count on me to, no matter what it is, Bible trivia, golf, racquetball, whatever it is, he knows, even if I'm bad at it, I'm gonna talk a fair amount of smack because it's so fun. And so I love when smack talk shows up in the Bible, and surely it does. Starting in verse 43, "And the Philistine said to David, 'Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks?' And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. And the Philistine said to David, 'Come to me, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the air and to the beasts of the fields.'" All right, that's fairly good, right? He's got the microphone. He's in the middle of the ring. He's talking smack to his challenger. And it says, "Then David said to the Philistine, 'You come to me. You want to talk about sticks? You want to talk about sticks? You come to me with a sword and with a spear and with a javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of the hosts." That means all the heavenly armies. "The God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied." Ooh, you in trouble. Going on with verse 46. This day, the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you down and cut off your head. And I will give the dead bodies of the host of the Philistines this day to the birds of the air and to the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel, and that all this assembly may know that the Lord saves, not with sword and spear. For the battle is the Lord's, and he will give it into our hand." And that is exactly what God does. David flings the rock, hits the giant directly in between the eyes. He falls. He uses the giant's own sword to decapitate the guy. And that's how the story ends, with David victorious. But the reason that David was victorious was because he knew whose battle he was fighting. David wasn't fighting for himself, not for his own personal gain or glory. David was fighting because he couldn't handle the offense that the name of the Lord was taking from the mouth of this Philistine. So I ask you, a question that we should ponder today. Whose battles are you fighting? Like, if you're a parent, when you're trying to train and discipline your kids, whose battle are you fighting? Are you trying to draw them closer to God and to His way of life? Or are you simply trying to make your life more comfortable and convenient by their obedience? When you're at work and there's a battle that you're fighting there, are you fighting once again for your glory and your position? Or are you fighting for integrity and to better serve your clients? Because that would be the heart of Jesus at your work. Man, when it comes to friendships, when there's conflict, is it because your personal preferences are offended, or because you see something in your friend's life that needs addressed because they're in danger of becoming distant from God? What battles are you choosing? Whose battles are you fighting? Ephesians 6:12 says this. Paul, encouraging the church in Ephesus, he says, "For our struggle is not against flesh and blood." The fights that I'm in are not with the people that are in the fight with me. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil. That's the battles that we fight. Even though it looks like it's against flesh and blood, it's not. We fight against the enemy. We fight against the serpent king. And we have to remember that. And so look at your life. The battles that you're fighting, are they your battles? For your glory, for your gain? Or are you fighting the battles of the Lord, seeking His will and His kingdom? And depending on where you land in that question, you might need to repent of fighting your own battles and return to the epic battle for humanity that determines eternity, and come back to the battle that matters. And so today, man, let's go and let's step into the battle against the serpent king today, and let's use our words, our actions, our decisions to gain ground for God in His name. See ya.